I will repeat the observation. The video is based on flawed reasoning. It's wrong to judge somebody by what they look like, but the guy that hits you with a skateboard strikes me as an anarchist, and probably doesn't vote. But what I actually want to point out is that it's nice to see the media narrative of the spineless pacifist liberal is finally disappearing. As an anarchist of the left, this is something that's bothered me for years, this false association of the left with peacenik hippie dipshits. We need to bring the fight back into the left, and breaking down this Vietnam War era media strawman is really fundamentally important in doing so. This concept of the leftist as this, clueless, pot smoking, you know, the left used to be the side of the spectrum that organized, strikes, and understood the world in terms of class conflict. Um, we might not like war, but it's because we realize that it's just, um, you're just fighting for the ruling class, whatever stupid thing, right? There's no benefit to the working people. Um, the idea that leftists are all pacifists, that they don't want to fight the structure, that it's. I wasn't alive in the 60s, right? I don't know how true that ever was. I know I've read enough about undercurrents of the 60s counterculture that were militant, but it seemed like the broad society, the broad counterculture, rejected it. They were more interested in upholding fashion. I think that it was the 60s where the left went wrong, right? This whole new left. That needs to be undone. Sorry old people, but you kind of fucked up. And you fucked up a lot of things. You fucked up the climate. And like all of these things are going to have to get undone. And the new left is one of those things. We can't build a better society if we're afraid to fight, if we're afraid to have conflict. The world is about conflict, and understanding class conflict. That was what the left was all about. Realizing that there's this upper class, there's a capitalist class that owns all our property, and there's the rest of us that are stuck working, right? And getting, they lost the plot. There was so much wealth. That's my understanding of it. I wasn't there again, but my understanding of it is that there was just so much wealth that they lost the plot. Okay? And it may have been tied into sort of a misunderstanding of what happened in India. I think that was a big part of it, right? There's some. I remember reading an article about Gandhi, Gandhi's tactics that was analyzed using game theory, and it was a brilliant article. But the point is that Gandhi didn't win through nonviolent tactics, right? His tactic was violent. The whole point was, okay, we've got this army here in front of us, and you're gonna do what we say, or we're gonna, release the hounds, kind of thing, right? And in the end, it were just said, we can't beat this, so we'll just give up, right? It was, a very rational decision on behalf of the British. Maybe more of a rational decision than you might be inclined to assign to a lot of these upper class types, but it nonetheless was effective, right? You don't do that by holding hands and singing Kumbaya, right? That's not emulating Gandhi. You emulate Gandhi by marching down the street with AK-47s and saying, we don't want to use this, but if you make us, then we will. right? And in fact, that's what the civil rights people did, right? The civil rights movement didn't win what it won because, it convinced people that this was the right thing to do. It won what it won by scaring the hell out of people. There's a million black people walking down the streets, and a lot of them are armed. What are we going to do? We better, give them some rights, or we're going to have a war on our hands, right? That's the right. See, it's very interesting to me that the device collapsed the moment I said, you emulate Gandhi by walking down the street with AK-47s and saying, I don't want to use this, but, we will if we have to, kind of thing. I've been thinking for a while that this device might be compromised. That kind of ties in with a broader understanding of the surveillance. I've gone to the great length of recording myself. Is that not enough for you? I'm recording it, I'm uploading it on the internet. I've made it very clear that there's nothing here to hide. I walk through customs multiple times a month. I mean, the whole reason that I'm in this situation right now is because I can't work when I have all these signals floating around. If you want me to get back to making music, the better thing for you to do is to, stop throwing all this interference at me. I don't know what you did to hack this thing, but like it's not gonna. It'll just make me go back to where I was saying. I believe I was pointing out that that was also the reason that the civil rights movement was able to accomplish what it accomplished, right? It's not as though, a bunch of black people got together and convinced, they're, a bunch of white capitalists that, these reforms were moral and it's the right thing to do or something. No, they marched down the street, millions of black people, along with a lot of white people. But they marched down the street with weapons, and they scared the ruling class. They scared them real good. Okay? That's what Gandhi was. That's what Gandhi accomplished. It's this idea that, this is our army, and we might not use it, but you need to make the decision as to whether you want to fight it or not. Okay? And that doesn't work anymore. Because, the ruling class has, they have drones, they have smart bombs, they have an array of weapons that is just not something that regular people can fight. What regular people can do, if they want to follow, the Gandhian approach, is organizing strikes, sit-down strikes. Even that is harder to put in place now than it was because so much of the production has moved out. But regardless, that's the weapon that exists. And the longer or the more often that you have organizers, taking kids out of the park, playing duck duck goose with them or whatever else, the less time is spent doing meaningful organizing, which has to be about denying labor, because there's no longer anything that working people can do to actually scare the system in terms of revolutionary potential. All we can do is refuse to work or try to take over. And I really honestly think that that's the long-term result. What is the United States going to look like in 30 years or 40 years? It's going to look like masses of unemployed people holding down factories by force. And so you're going to have the neighborhood fighting against the National Guard to take control over a factory. It's going to look more like the French Revolution than the Russian Revolution. And the reason they're going to be fighting to take over that factory is because it's going to be a food factory. Okay, and it's going to be the only way that they can feed themselves. Is if they organize and they take over production by force. It's a breaking point. But I think that the path that we're on has no other logical endpoint. So, yeah, it would be nice to get back to more of a class conflict-based concept of the left, and lose this, hippies holding hands, singing songs kind of thing. That hasn't gotten us very far. The tactics that we used to use were far more effective.